Have you noticed this strange feeling when you're looking at yourself in the mirror? It's a feeling of strangeness, as if you do not recognize yourself, right? Have you ever wondered that maybe you don't recognize yourself because the one that appears in the mirror is not you, and you might be the one who is observing to the one who is in the mirror? After so many years studying the texts from different philosophical and spiritual traditions, after engaging in different rituals with people in different cultures, in different parts of the world, I have realized that there seems to be an underlying unity, I would say a metaphysical unity, behind all these different dogmas, traditions, and teachings. For me, it's so important to try to make sense of life out of a certain intellectual comprehension of it, that I decided to share with people who might feel attracted to this rational and intellectual effort to trying to grasp what the sages all along life have tried to taught us about what life is about. And this is the sense of veils of unity. In different religions, there seems to be some dogmas and some commandments that we should follow in order to be able to achieve a real goal in life. In my perspective, in my opinion, there are so many contrasting opinions about what these commandments should be, or even some contradictory tenets or philosophical conceptions in these dogmas, that I wonder, how is it possible that different religions, which are supposed to have access to the truth through revelation or through the teachings of their own sages, how is it possible that they can teach sometimes quite contradictory things? For instance, the prohibitions or what people should do or should not do. One can see that there are some aspects that tend to be common in all religions. One could even say they are like core values within them, but one can also see that there are so many commandments which are quite contradictory among themselves. So that's why I thought that we should try to search for those core aspects which are common, to search for that underlying metaphysical unity behind all these confessional divergences. Veils of unity is an effort to trying to make sense of spirituality, independent of the different traditions in which this spirituality takes place. That's why, in order to grasp what might be this unity underlying all these philosophical and religious traditions, it's so important to differentiate the metaphysical, the cosmological, the ontological, the epistemological, and the eschatological aspects. These dimensions and these words, which at first hand might sound kind of strange or really unknown to us, they're very useful in order to organize all this knowledge that has been given to us from different sages and prophets all along life. We will try to deal with these concepts and the way in which we may apply them to make sense of Catholicism or Judaism or Islam or Taoism, because we may see that sometimes it appears to be just one truth revealed or explained in different manners to different cultures in different moments in history. And that is why we should, in my opinion, we should try to understand the structure, the conceptual structure that underlies all these teachings. And this is what we will try to delve into, beginning in this first episode in Veils of Unity. Metaphysics is probably one of the most important concepts that we should keep in mind when we are trying to understand the structure and the proposals of these different philosophical, spiritual, and religious traditions. Metaphysics deals with the ultimate reality, with what reality really is. So it's quite a quest, right? Trying to answer what really lies behind all these appearances that we call the world. In fact, accepting that this might be just an appearance is already one kind of metaphysical attitude or position out of which we are trying to understand all this. So metaphysics is probably the grounding, the foundation of every religious and spiritual tradition, because it posits a way of making sense of how all the world, all history, and our own experience occurs and unfolds, but requiring some presumptions, some assumptions, I would say, which assume that there is an underlying reality that we cannot perceive with our senses or with our minds, but we can grasp with our intellect in the heart. So metaphysics has to deal with the ultimate structure of reality, and it will be one of the main concepts that we will be dealing with all along these episodes in Veils of Unity. Another very important concept when we are trying to understand these sacred teachings is epistemology. Epistemology deals with what knowledge is, how we can acquire that knowledge, and which are valid sources of that knowledge. So when we are trying to understand any philosophical or religious conception, we must, first of all, we must understand what is their epistemological perspective. That is to say, in which way they conceive knowledge, to what extent they think that revelation or perception or reasoning or intuition play a role in understanding the truth about life. So we will be dealing also with epistemology all along this process. So metaphysics and epistemology will be two core concepts that will guide us in order to understand the tenets and the assumptions of every religious or philosophical or spiritual tradition that we will be analyzing. Out of these metaphysical and epistemological assumptions arise always some sort of cosmology. Every religious and spiritual tradition proposes some specific cosmology, an understanding of how the cosmos arises and how it is balanced, which are the kind of strength or forces that are struggling or imbalance, and how everything is organized in the world. So cosmology is a way of depicting, let's say symbolically, in which way the truth of life are manifested in a sort of harmony in the manifestation that we call cosmos. I invite you to do a little experiment. Stop and become aware of the fact that you are aware. And now, try to find out who is the one who is guiding your perception. If your first answer is a simple I, try to find out who is that I who knows that you are that I. We mentioned cosmology. There's also another proposal in some of the religious traditions, which is an eschatological perspective, an eschatological framework. Eschatology deals with what happens after annihilation, what happens after destruction, whether we are talking about ourselves or the cosmos. So eschatology has to do with the afterlife. And there are different proposals, especially in the Abrahamic traditions, which are quite interesting, and one can contrast them with, for instance, the Tibetan proposals of what eschatology is about, the different stages of it, how people can prepare themselves to die. In many traditions, it is said that life is just a preparation to die. So it's very interesting to grasp the inner meaning of these eschatological proposals in order to understand what role they play in order to live in a more vivid and meaningful life, our life. So in eschatology, we think about death in order to become responsible for our lives, and we will deal with that too. And finally, there is soteriology. Every religion promises one thing: eternal peace. And this eternal peace should be achieved through a method, following a certain path. And it's very interesting to see what these different paths in different spiritual traditions look like. One can see quite different ways of approaching the spiritual practices, the spiritual discipline, whether it comes from a Abrahamic tradition or a Taoist tradition or a Shaiva or a Vishnu tradition in India, for instance. So we have different paths guiding to liberation, which is what soteriology is about. And we will be trying to understand what these different disciplines and practices share, what they have in common, and why they are different in different traditions. I have a feeling that each path is complete in itself and makes perfect sense for some cultures, in some moments in history, and not necessarily for other people. So soteriology is the promise that if we follow a certain path, we will achieve our last goal, represented as being in the presence of God forever, or realizing our own real nature. So here in Veils of Unity, we will try to explore and get deep into the teachings of these sacred texts through these philosophical concepts related to metaphysics, epistemology, cosmology, soteriology, eschatology, in order to organize this information in a way that can make sense first to our intellect, in such a way that then our heart can eventually feel attracted to that knowledge. So it's not that we pretend to reduce all this knowledge or wisdom just to concepts or philosophical conceptualizations. Quite the contrary. It's just that some of us need to first have this organized in a quite clear conceptual manner before we might be willing to delve into direct spiritual experience.